What Type of Social Justice Do We Want? By Michael Mills, Robert Maranto, and Richard Redding. Published in Skeptic magazine, July-August issue, 2024. In recent years, a shift has occurred in higher education and public discourse. The term social justice, which once evoked ideals of fairness, equality, and individual rights, has been redefined. What was once a call for equal opportunity has increasingly become a framework for division, ideological conformity, and censorship. This shift has been driven by the rise of critical social justice, an offshoot of critical theory. Proponents claim to fight injustice, but in practice, they often suppress dissent, label disagreement as bigotry, and prioritize ideological activism over education. The consequences are real. Free inquiry is under attack. Individuals are categorized not by their character but by their identity, and institutions of higher learning are becoming centers of ideological enforcement rather than spaces for open discussion. How did we get here, and what should we do about it? The origins of critical social justice. To understand today's ideological landscape, we must go back to the origins of critical theory. Traditional social science sought to understand human nature and society through observation, empirical research, and logical reasoning. Critical theory, developed in the 1920s by thinkers associated with the Frankfurt School in Germany, rejected this approach. Instead of seeking objective truth, critical theorists viewed knowledge itself as a tool of power, controlled by the dominant class to maintain oppression. Building on Marxist ideas, critical theorists shifted their focus from class struggle to broader categories of oppression. Marxist theory framed society as a battle between two groups: the bourgeoisie, owners, and the proletariat, workers. Critical theorists expanded this into new categories: race, gender, sexuality, and beyond, framing all social relationships as struggles between oppressors and oppressed. This Marxist methodology follows a predictable pattern. Divide society into two groups. One group is labeled oppressed, the other as oppressors. Frame disparities as evidence of systemic injustice. The dominant group is assumed to benefit from oppression, even without intent. Dismiss counter-arguments as attempts to preserve privilege. Those who question the theory are accused of defending oppression. Promote activism as the solution. The goal is not debate but radical change, sometimes by dismantling institutions, restricting speech, or enforcing ideological compliance. Over time, these ideas evolved into what we now call critical social justice. Today, this ideology is being taught in universities under various labels: critical race theory, gender studies, decolonization, and intersectionality. But despite its claims of promoting fairness, this approach often undermines the very principles that allow societies to address injustice: free speech, rational discourse, and equality under the law. How critical social justice undermines free inquiry. In a traditional liberal education, students are encouraged to question ideas, challenge assumptions, and explore multiple perspectives. Education is not about telling students what to think, but teaching them how to think. Critical social justice reverses this. Instead of encouraging debate, it demands ideological conformity. We see this in how universities treat speech. Professors and students who question critical social justice narratives are often ostracized, silenced, or even removed from campus. For example, Brett Weinstein, a professor at Evergreen State College, was forced to resign after objecting to a race-segregated day of absence event. Lindsay Shepard, a teaching assistant in Canada, was reprimanded for showing a neutral debate on gender pronouns. Dorian Abbott, a University of Chicago professor, was disinvited from an MIT lecture for opposing race-based admissions. These examples are not isolated incidents. Surveys show that many professors and students fear expressing viewpoints that contradict critical social justice ideology. When people self-censor to avoid backlash, free thought dies. This is not just an issue of political disagreement. It's a rejection of the core values of liberal democracy. The redefinition of social justice. One of the most effective strategies of critical social justice is its manipulation of language. Terms that once had widely understood meanings, social justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, have been subtly redefined to fit ideological goals. Consider the difference between liberal social justice and critical social justice. Liberal social justice focuses on individual rights and equal opportunity, emphasizes free speech and open inquiry, supports equal treatment under the law, Critical social justice generally focuses on group identity and equal outcomes, restricts speech to protect marginalized groups, supports discrimination to achieve parity, argues that laws must be restructured to support equality of outcome rather than equality of opportunity. Similarly, terms like equity, diversity, and inclusion have shifted in meaning. Equity now means equal outcomes, often requiring quotas or preferential treatment. Diversity no longer includes viewpoint diversity. It refers primarily to identity-based representation. Inclusion often means suppressing speech that some groups find offensive, rather than fostering true dialogue. By redefining these terms, critical social justice gains credibility while advancing an ideology that undermines its own stated goals. What's at stake? When critical social justice dominates institutions, the consequences extend beyond academia. In law, the push to replace blind justice with identity-based justice weakens equality before the law. In workplaces, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives often lead to hiring based on identity rather than merit. In media, narratives are shaped not by evidence but by ideological assumptions about power and oppression. Most concerning, however, is the way critical social justice erodes trust between individuals, institutions, and even within communities. When people are judged by their group identity rather than their actions, resentment grows. When dissent is silenced, bad ideas go unchallenged. The irony is that many who support critical social justice genuinely want a more just society. But justice cannot be achieved by categorizing people into oppressors and oppressed. It cannot be achieved by restricting free inquiry, and it cannot be achieved by replacing fairness with ideological dogma. What can be done? If we want a society that truly values justice, we must reclaim the foundational principles of liberal democracy. Defend free speech. Protect the right to question and debate ideas, no matter how controversial. Promote viewpoint diversity. Encourage true intellectual diversity, not just demographic representation. Reject identity-based justice. Advocate for equal treatment under the law rather than group-based privilege. Hold institutions accountable. Push back against universities and organizations that enforce ideological conformity. Encourage resilience. Teach students and young professionals to think critically, challenge ideas, and stand up for their beliefs. The battle over social justice is not just about politics. It's about truth, freedom, and the kind of society we want to build. So we must ask ourselves, do we want a society where justice is based on facts, fairness, and open debate, or one where ideology dictates reality and dissent is not tolerated? The choice is ours.